I remember school choice really coming up for the first time to me in the 90s when I was a young political staffer, and there was a thing called the Choice Charitable Trust, which was a scholarship program for inner city kids in Indianapolis, funded by Pat Rooney, who was a titan of business here. And the idea behind that was we're going to give out scholarships to kids, and it'll be so evident that these kids are better off in a different school that it'll be just obvious we should have school choice for everybody. The obviousness was lost on a lot of people, even though those kids did do better. And Choice Charitable Trust is still administered now by IQE, but that was one of the efforts. Mayor Goldsmith fought with the IPS school board all the time about how to make IPS better. It seems like a story that may still be going on. I think I saw Brandon Brown in the room. We're still working on that. There was a thing called CLASS, which was kind of a civic group that got together to try to improve education. That kind of went along. That was just the 90s. And then in 2000s, we had charter law got passed. Derek Redelman, who's here, was involved in that. Charters, even then, were kind of a small step in the right direction. A couple of years later, Mitch Daniels got elected, and all our national friends said, oh, you have Mitch Daniels as governor. You'll have school choice tomorrow. Well, not exactly. Lots of things had to happen. And so we kept going on and on and on. And then finally, we got vouchers in 2011. Those sort of took off slowly. ESAs a couple of years ago. Career scholarship accounts a couple of years ago. So anyway, there's all these things that have happened even in Indiana, and I consider us a complete success. So that's how hard it is, which is why it's so important that Robert's in Texas tonight.
Well, and on that, I was reflecting on the history, and you think about the dates and time. What comes to my mind is the people who made it happen. I mean, you talk about driving the level of change in Indiana at the pace that happened. And likely this session, we're going to see universal choice. Every parent has the opportunity to decide what's best for their child. And I think about the people. So some of the people are here. You mentioned Robert. I jotted his name down. Betsy Wiley is here. She's been a major reason why this has moved. Teresa Lubbers, who is not here, but someone should text her and tell her. But she was, when I came in, kind of, people always pointed to her as like the mother of school choice, because she carried the water for so many years at the State House. Bob Baining, Todd Houston, and then of course Mitch Daniels. And there are multiple others like John L. Sesser. I could go around. I shouldn't have started, because I started on the end and I could really go down. But the only way that major change happens is the people behind it. And hats off to all the folks in Indiana who built this foundation.
Well, and you're a part of that now. You've been around it for many years now. And I'll give you, just in case you all don't know, Katie's credentials. So she started as a teacher. She was a school administrator, worked in the CTE world, I believe, for a little while too. Ivy Tech, worked on K-12 partnerships, advisor to Governor Holcomb, now Secretary of Education. And so I think she is a uniquely qualified person at this moment in time to take Indiana to the next level of innovation, which is what this is really all about. Whether it's private school choice or innovation within public schools or the apprenticeship stuff or other graduation things. And there are now something like 30% of the students in Indiana are choosing where they go to school, which is a huge victory. And they're choosing their own educational pathway and destiny. So I think a lot of these things really come down to who's in the room working on these things, to what your point was. Sort of like we were talking about, you're a big football fan, I know. And,
I told him I'm a big tailgate fan.
I'm a big football fan. So everything.
Full disclosure, I like the tailgate. Yeah. I tolerate the football.
So everything to me is a football analogy. So, the Kansas City Chiefs, pretty good football team. They hired a great head coach a few years ago. They got a guy named Pat Mahomes playing quarterback. They got a great defensive coach. They got a guy named Travis Kelce. They got all these other players. All those things have to come together for this stuff to really happen, for them to be as good as they are. And I think Indiana's lucky to have someone like Katie who has this broad experience at different levels of education to say, all right, I got a bigger vision and more creativity about this, because ultimately school choice, and Milton Friedman, who was our founder of our organization, always said that the real point of school choice is to drive an innovative learning system. He didn't worry about test scores or this school versus that school. He thought that competition would actually create a more innovative system that would serve every child more completely. And that was his main goal. And that's our goal as an organization still. So anyway, we're glad you're here to be a part of this. And now we'll just go through a few questions and you just tell me what you think, and then we'll go from there.
Great.
If you guys have questions too at the end, we'll have some time. So flashing back a little bit to sort of the school choice journey we just described. You saw that tell us about your own school choice journey and where you were when you started all this and where you are now.
Yeah, so probably a few people in the room have heard my story. So I've lived in Indiana about 20 years. I live in Southern Indiana, so I've been around for the full movement. But when it was first moving, I was at a traditional public school. I felt like what we were doing was really good. I was a young parent. I was thinking back in 2011 when a lot of it moved with Mitch Daniels. I had a 1-year-old, so I was at that point just like, make sure they don't break something or hit their head. I wasn't thinking school choice yet. But at the time, I was not a believer. And I just want to like shoot it straight with you all. I was not at the time at the place of like, yes, every parent should decide. It should be open. And my evolution was really, it was a meant to be thing. Number one, the school district that I was working with at the time, we were trying to figure out some innovative solutions for some of the challenges that we were having. That put me, a couple colleagues on the road. We didn't care what school we were going to. We just wanted to learn what might work. And we visited, one of the schools we had visited was the Excel Center, the charter school, right? Adult charter, a non-pub, traditional pub. We just visited where things were working. And what I saw and learned is in any school I ever go into, I always think of, and maybe you do this too, would I send my kids here? Would I send my kids here? Because my goal is we can all walk into a school and want to send our kids there. And so as I was traveling around, I had some very real moments of they are doing a better job than we are doing in certain aspects. And I took that message home, and and again, I mentioned Excel Center because it remains in my mind about a couple of things that they were doing that we wanted to implement. But that totally opened my eyes to, wait a second, as a parent, there are other options that for that particular child, they might do a better job. The other thing it really did, you all, is when I saw these other really great things, it made me look in the mirror for our school district. Again, I very humbly am sharing with you, like at the time, we felt like we were doing everything we could for children. We thought we were right. We were working long hours, doing all the things we thought. But when it became more free market and parents could move with their feet, that was that look in the mirror moment, and we realized we need to up our movement a little bit. We need to listen to our parents, listen to our students, understand what they're looking for, and make sure we are addressing that locally. So it totally, like in a full circle way, and I think, quite frankly, at the time, this position was elected. I mean, let's be honest, where's back in the day? I never dreamed I would be in this moment, but starting with that perspective has absolutely shaped where I am today and why I can wholeheartedly advocate that parents should determine what's best for their child. And I talked to one parent advocate in the back. I don't see her right now. There you are. You. And she sends 2 of her kids to one school, 1 of her children, right, to another school. And we should celebrate that. We've got to do what's best for kids, and it's every child counts.
Yeah, well, you've been probably going to travel around to all of these communities and choices taking hold in different ways in different places. I remember when we first met, you were telling about some of the innovative things that some of the public schools you'd seen were doing, but what's communities or what are you seeing out there as evidence of this is really innovating the system, both public and private, or even sort of community partnership-wise? Anything jump to mind?
Yeah, so there are seeds of, and I always share this like in a very real way. Like we have quality non-public schools, we have quality charter schools, we have quality traditional public. And we also have schools in each of those areas that are struggling. So right now, when I travel the state, what I see is the schools that are moving the most are those who have the community partners right there with them, and it varies. So, but K-12, higher ed, business and industry working together. I think about and Batesville's always mentioned. I ran into Oldenburg Academy's folks a couple nights ago. I know the superintendent there, but they're working together. That's another thing I look at. Where are charter schools, non-pub, traditional public working together? I don't know if Scott Bess is here, but he used to work with a gentleman named George Philhauer, who is a traditional public school. That's another element I look at. And partly why is I don't know if you looked at the state budget, but there's not enough resources for us to do all the things for everyone. And there's a bill that's likely going to come up about how we can work together on things like even transportation. And whether that's transportation to schools or whether that's transportation to work-based learning, I think that's the kind of creativity that we have to be willing to have the conversation. Gosh, let me give you another city other than Batesville. They were big rivals in Madison. I can't believe that's the only one.
We won't tell them you're saying nice things about them.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We'll keep going, but I could flag multiple.
Let's harken back to what you kind of talked about your own journey, because I think I've seen in the 20 odd years I've been doing this, a real shift in attitude amongst, like I have friends who are in the education business, they're traditional public school teachers, whatnot, and they kind of see that this is real and it's not going away, and they're trying to adapt to it. Have you seen the same thing amongst sort of more traditional public school educators or people you run around with, the attitude?
100%. Coming in January of 2021, the dynamic with the school choice community, it was rough. It was really, really rough. To the point that, and I'm looking at some of you, John, I don't know if you all would get in rooms very often together and agree on a ton, maybe some, but now you all, it's frequent. Now when I pull together principals or pull together school, teachers, what have you, many times our best innovators, we come together and talk about how to make it more education, more quality. I think there's opportunity to continue that. Again, I mentioned the partnership opportunities amongst who is working together to think through solutions based on the resources we have. I think there's more opportunity, but it's evolved incredibly. How have you all noticed it evolving, the conversation? I don't know how looped in you all are to the political scene, and I see Kerry shaking his head. It's hot in here. You all are trying not to move because you're like, I will sweat if I shake my head. I get it. But it is absolutely improved. And again, I point to the people who've helped make that happen. I also will look at IQE and making sure that somebody was whispering in Betsy's ear. So I was just like, it's the teacher in me. I'm making sure she's listening. But I think about IQE. With the high school redesign as an example, multiple times we pulled all school types to highlight and celebrate. If you read the weekly newsletters, all school types. I think we have to keep doing more of that because it's about quality education for all, and we got to keep pushing so that every school you walk in, you would send your kids there or your nieces or nephews or what have you.
It's funny you mentioned George Philhauer at Eastern Hancock, and I actually came across him one day on LinkedIn or something, and I just messaged him and said, yeah, I'm in the school choice business, and you're doing cool things out of your school. Can I come for a visit? He said, yeah, sure.
What year was this?
This was like 6 months ago.
Oh, well, you're late to the game.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, that's to me is an example of a public school educator
who
was like, yeah, come on out, let's talk. And so I've run into that more and more, and it's been fun to see. So you've now been around the choice stuff for a while. Like, things seem to be going well in the choice world in Indiana. I mean, we're expanding the program. We're going to go to Universal this year, thanks to Governor Braun and others. Looking out a little bit, what do you think the future of school choice can be? Both sort of what's the positive you see, and maybe are there some things we need to be thinking about as a movement that we need to, guard against, I don't know if it's complacency or implementation problems or other things. What do you see the kind of opportunities and maybe the, I don't want to say risk exactly, but things we need to be paying attention to?
So Governor Braun this is one of his top items. Make sure it's a parent-decided and supported education. So we're looking at making some announcements soon to really double down on this effort, noting that, remember, some parents choose traditional public to traditional public. Some choose to go to non-public, charter, whatever it might be. Couple things in the governor's budget, and again, right now, those of you who have already talked to me about budget, it's in pencil right now, not in stone. Long session ahead. In the governor's budget, though, right now out of the gate, I think he's doubled ESA dollars. He's increased CSA dollars, career scholarship accounts. The opportunity, like if I'm really looking forward, I think, the CSAs, that's first in the nation. If I get asked about school choice in Indiana, that's what people are talking about right now. I see Ryan back there and others. That's what people are nationwide are thinking through. And I see a couple of you, and I'm not going to point you out because I don't want to embarrass you. Again, it's the teacher in me. I'm watching your faces. No one nod off. I'll call you out. I was that person. But someone was like, so I'm going to just... CSA's is career scholarship account. Career scholarship account was a priority bill for the House in 2023, so the last budget session. And what it allows is every sophomore, junior, senior, all school types, up to a certain amount, or up to a certain number of students, because it's capped out in how many, can get up to $5,000 to support if they want to do a work-based learning or an apprenticeship opportunity. It supports their transportation. If they are 2 credits shy away from completing a credential of value, which is educational attainment in their pocket for free, saves them time and money. It could help them complete the dual enrollment courses to get that credential. I think there are opportunities, and we work, I should say, the department, the Commission for Higher Ed, and the Treasurer's Office work hand in hand on that. I think there are incredible opportunities to keep on improving that for kids. We're sold out of spots. We have a wait list, which is a good thing when advocating because we can try to push more. But I think one of the cool elements with that is it's open to, again, all school types can have access to that. And so it kind of takes any kind of pushback out of it. You all have access. We all can do better for kids, make high school more valuable. So that's an area that I think we're going to see nationwide. A lot more innovation in that space.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of my state partner friends who are asking about that now because they see it as an extension of choice, really, which choice, work-based learning, CSAs, those are all kind of tied together. It's just a child making a decision about how they want to learn and meet their destiny.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
I have a lot more, but I know we're short on time.
Oh, you go all you want.
But another that we've heard is with all of our school choice options in Indiana, think about not only the K-12 space, but also think about the early learning space. Like, one of the questions that we're wrestling is, how might we make this as easy as possible for parents? Like, what could that look like? Where you have a young child, this is where you go to understand your options. We have some work to do, a lot of folks that we need to talk to, but I think that has to be front of mind. How do we make it easier for parents to know what options are out there? That's something I get asked a lot. It's odd. I'm telling you, the good Lord works in mysterious ways. Every time I'm in an Uber from the Indianapolis airport to where I live in Indy, it inevitably is a parent that wants to talk to me about school choice. It's wild. Talk about stories. I could tell you some, but not enough time.
Yeah. Well, get them one person at a time.
One person at a time.
Well, that's great. Let me give you a few minutes to talk about, big changes coming in Indiana education. Big innovation is the new way high school is going to be operating and defined and all those things, which I think is a great thing. Talk about that a little bit. What should we all be looking forward to? how'd the processing work? I know it was wrangling a lot of people together, and you survived. Congratulations.
Barely.
But yeah, tell us about.
Did you see those headlines? Lordy. Woo!
To me, that's a huge innovation and a huge testament to giving people what they really want and giving them the choices.
Yeah. So, we started that conversation with, we have kids for 4 years in high school, right? If you think of the oldest person think about the oldest person who graduated from an American high school. If you ask them to see their transcript and you ask one of our seniors to show their transcript, they are almost identical. And yet the world around us has changed so much, technological innovation. So we started with the question of how might we make the 4 years of high school more valuable for kids so that it's really lighting the fire of purpose in kids, showing them their value and the possibilities. There are also just very, honestly, several data points that are hitting us as a state that we need to pay attention to. Number one, we have this is a nationwide stat, but in Indiana, fewer students are going on to higher ed. But what's interesting is when we survey students, 76% of the students, when they walk across the graduation stage, say they're going to go on to higher ed. Only 53% do. That's a 16,000 student delta annually where they go out of high school with a dream, and for whatever reason, something happens. And so the question is, okay, if that's their dream, then how can we connect them earlier so that they can get there? We also see that we hear it from our business and industry, that the skills our students are leaving with are not what they always need to be successful later. The most common communication, usually if I'm close to the audience, I'm close to you, so I'm gonna check you. Can you shake your hand and not be a floppy fish? Can you make eye contact? Yes, amen, right? Can you, when you're talking, if you talk to a teenager and like Brian's talking to me and my shoulder's this way and I'm kind of like looking over my shoulder rather than like facing Brian, those skills have to be taught and practiced. So business and industry, the 3 skills we hear about the most: communication, collaboration. Collaboration, you've probably heard me share this before. I think as a country, we have to learn to disagree better. I think every opinion matters. We have to listen to understand. I walked into, and there aren't many classrooms that I walk into, and I'm like, I've got to get out of here or there's going to be a problem. But I did walk into a class, I won't tell you where. I walked into a classroom several months back, and there were 3 students on each side debating an issue. They were tough issues. But you know how the students were debating? How they would respond to each other on social media. You're an idiot. No, you're, like they weren't listening. And I had to get myself together because I'm like, wanted to go up and take the students, say, okay, hear what he's saying, think through it, then respond. That's a taught skill that we have to work through. And the other one we hear about is work ethic. Employers are like, we need people to come to work. And we're like, we need people to come to school, right? The third big area for those students who are dreaming about serving our country, dreaming to serve our country, this was probably one of the most startling because I live and breathe education and workforce data. This was new data. General Lyles and the military branches got together and they said, Katie, do you know of all the Indiana graduates who raised their hand and want to serve our country, we turned down 77% because they don't meet character or physical requirements. And so much of that, you all, it gives me cold chills. It's about giving kids and parents the recipe. What's the recipe for success? Let's share that much earlier than the end of your high school. It has to be well known. Here's the recipe. We all have unique paths, but here's the potential recipe. And then the fourth big area with the high school redesign and why we had to go this direction is student apathy in our country is at an all-time high. One of the data points we look at is chronic absenteeism. And what we saw is while Indiana is higher than our national data, we have an inverted bell curve. So our front end, our K-1-2 kids don't come as much. For some reason, parents send their middle school kids to school. I get it as a past recovering middle school mom. And then in high school, it shoots back up again. Seniors, last year's seniors, and by the way, this is better than the national average. I'm gonna tell it, I'm gonna like prepare yourself. It's better than the national average and it's already improved since COVID. Last year, 32% of Indiana seniors missed about a month or more of school. That's a third. And when we do focus groups with students, you know what they say? They say a couple different answers, but the most common is, I just don't see the value. I just don't see the value. And again, talk about a look in the mirror moment. So the high school diploma process, just to move it through fast, General Assembly gave me that requirement. Rulemaking is required for 2 drafts. We launched the first draft as soon as they sine died last session. That was in March. Now, launching 2 major policy movements during a gubernatorial campaign was not a smart move. That was tough because it got caught into politics a little bit. But a lot of headlines hit in July, specifically from higher education. So we had to step back, reflect, talk to a lot of the higher ed presidents, all of our publics on the phone personally. And we got to that second draft that was very, very popular, affirmed by every higher ed institution, public and private in Indiana, educator, leaders, some who are in the room, business and industry, et cetera, but it allows personalization and flexibility for students so that they can seize their path. And then it also allows opportunities for students to earn a seal, which, stay tuned, there'll be some good incentive to that. I just can't get over my skis, but stay tuned on more there. But we're moving, and we're going to make it better for kids.
Yeah, that's great. And that was a big initiative in a very short amount of time. I mean, if I'm recounting what I just told you about the school choice history here, that took 20 some years.
These dark circles are real. Yes.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I remember when I worked with Governor Daniels, he did his last year, he did a tour of all the high schools, and he started asking kids, tell me what we should do differently. And most of them said we should have a 3-year experience because the 4th year is a waste of time. I'm not sure if that's true for everybody, but that was what the kids told him. And so they actually created this Daniels scholarship for that. You can leave early and whatnot, but it takes time to do all these things. What's the key?
And on that note, what we're seeing, that junior and senior year, we're seeing our best mover and shaker high schools are already doing some of this. And again, I could hit all school types, more experiential learning to actually practice the skill development. I'm a teacher. I know very clearly that Ron's shaking his head right now and he could be thinking of his to-do list that he has to do later. Kids are really good at that. Think back when you were in high school. You could act like you were writing notes, whatever. But it's by practicing and experiencing, that's when you learn. So more experiential learning, work-based learning, and then also more students earning credentials of value. Indiana's #1 in the nation for students leaving with college credit. About 60, depending on the year, 62 to 64% of our students leave with college credit. The average leaves with 13.5 college credits. That's between 1 and 2 or 3 classes of completing a credential, which is educational attainment. And that saves the parent time and money. That connects them to what could be possible next. It's just a win-win, and we've got to do more of that.
Let me take you back a little bit to your school choice journey, and actually ties into, I think, what you were just talking about. So you took a very complicated topic of let's change high school. And most people, I think, they think of high school, they think of what they went through, whatever it was 20 years ago for some of us or more. How do you approach people who are probably not on your side to start with? How do you try to get them to think the way you do about these tough topics? Education is a very personal thing, so it's hard to go into people and say, let me tell you why you're wrong. So how do you do it?
Yeah. Most commonly, I'll point to examples of, have you checked that out? Have you gone to visit George Philhauer to hear how he's working with? Have you, I encourage when possible people to talk to the change agents of our state and who's actually moving it so that they can start, so many people, probably more than not, if you have the skill set personally to set a vision and implement it and do both of those things, you are leaps and bounds ahead. A lot of people, truly, they can set a vision, but then they've got to grab a friend to help implement, or their friend sets the vision, and then they're the implementer. So I do my best when I'm trying to sell something to connect them with people who are doing it, to students who have experienced it, to parents who have saved a ton of money and their child's now on the direction. Gosh, Molly, how else do we drive change? I try to think it all comes down to people and your allies. So, again, so many people in this room who've come to the table for whether it's rethinking high school or reading. By the way, stay tuned to Indiana's reading scores that come out nationally tomorrow. I'm not able to say, or I promise you I would. It's 12:01 a.m. It comes out.
No one here is going to say anything. Just go ahead and tell me.
Yeah. They threatened us. They're like, we will shut you down. And I'm like, okay, got it. But the reading work, I think we've got to get after math. We have to be more innovative, I think, around our school day. It's still so much sit and get, depending on what school. I could go on, but it's all about the people who come to the table to try to drive it forward. You think about Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels had an army, and that's how he drove that change, because he didn't have to be in the room, but the army was talking about it. So as much as we can do that together, we should.
Well, I think Indiana is getting a well-deserved reputation as a leader in innovation and education for sure, and you're a big part of that. But is there anything that you see happening in other places that you'd like to import here that we haven't quite done yet? Because, you're already going to have universal school choice and you're changing high school forever. It's a pretty big list, a good list so far. But is there one thing you've seen somebody else do you're thinking, we ought to be thinking about X? Okay,
I am so competitive. When I see something, I immediately probably hop on the call and I'm like, we gotta go. It doesn't keep me up at night so much as right now, because it's in such a competitive spot, you all. And I'm not just saying that. If you go to national conferences and a number of spaces, we are very competitive. I think what we have to think about as a state is how to ensure we keep the urgency. Let's not be like Texas, God love them, glad it went well today, and take 25 years to do something. That's a whole generation of student. So together, I think we have to move with urgency. And the second thing I would say that I see other states fall victim to, and I kind of learn from, is we can't boil the ocean. If we try to do all of the things, if my list went on and on and on forever, you should be concerned, right? We need to focus on our foundations, make sure those are solid, make sure the high school experience is the best it can be, make sure we have better connections between K-12 and what happens next for a child, ensuring that parents continue to have strong choices for their child's education. I could go on, but then I'd defeat the point that I was just trying to make, which is don't boil the ocean. That's right. Stay very focused.
No, that's fair. Well, I was sharing with somebody earlier, I was at an event last fall where we were talking about innovation and education, and I asked one of my panelists, how do you know innovation's working, or when are you done? And he said, well, you're never done. Once you're in the innovation mode, you just keep iterating, you keep changing, you keep tackling the next challenge, because as soon as you've tackled one, then, there's something else will rise up. So I think you've got the right attitude, but you're right, you can't do it all at once. And you got to make sure what you're doing, you have to do it well. And that's the implementation battles across the country now for us are a big part of that. So
the other thing I would just flag in Indiana that I think we're pretty good at, and several in this room are leading the charge, is we have several incubators of innovation going on that we're watching closely, and whether that's micro schools, whether that is like the future of teacher license flexibility and how to really innovate in that space. But there are a number of incubators that I think we have to keep on encouraging and trying. That's the only way we figure out what might work, is it starts locally. Someone bold and courageous starts locally, that it slowly expands, it catches, quite frankly, the attention during a budget year, and you get a first investment, then it expands a little bit more. That's how a lot of Indiana's change has moved so quickly as well. So we have to keep innovating. What from another state are you excited about? Now you have my competitive juices flowing.
Yeah.
I'm totally judging you.
Well,
Who are you
I'll
on?
come up with something, and then I think we're going to take some questions. I think Drew's got a mic in a second. But what I've seen a lot of, and I think this school choice movement needs to figure out how to incorporate, is how do we take work-based learning and all these things that people are trying to do and really make that part of the choice vernacular. And people see them still as separate things. But to me, it's just another choice somebody's making about how they want to learn. So we do a lot of work in Montana on sort of traditional school choice, but also on, they do a lot of expansive work around getting their kids' career town and whatnot. So I think accreditation is going to be a big deal. I think microschooling is here to stay. We'll see how big it gets. We're doing a lot of work on that. Making it easier for people to access all these things is a big deal. So EdChoice is doing a lot of work on these. We want to get everybody eligible. We want to make sure they can use all the different kinds of options. That's where I think places like Arizona and Florida are ahead of us in just giving more and more ability to choose a traditional school, a private school, a charter school, a home school, a micro school, some combination of all those things. So that's what I think we are paying attention to, is the innovation space.
Good.
So.
Thank you.